to Withum's video series, The Alternative Route. Today we're picking up with Kevin Cassidy from Seward and Kissel, as well as Matt DiBrienza, partner at Withum. Kevin and Matt, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks, Colleen.
So let's jump right in. Kevin, under the new private fund rules, can you give us some background on the rules in general and which apply to the unregistered advisors?
Sure. There are 4 rules that are going to apply to SEC registered private fund advisors. Those are the quarterly statement rule, the audit rule, the advisor-led secondaries rule, and amendments that were made to the books and records rule relating to the new private fund rules. The rules that apply to all U.S. private fund advisors, including venture capital advisors and other unregistered advisors, which we're going to focus on, are the Preferential Treatment Rule and the Restricted Activities Rule.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about that Preferential Treatment Rule and what the timing for compliance will be?
Sure. These rules prohibit an advisor from granting an investor in a private fund or a similar pool of assets preferential liquidity or transparency if the advisor reasonably expects that such grant would have a material negative effect on other investors. There's an exception to the prohibition if the term is offered to all investors, or with respect to liquidity only, if the term is granted pursuant to a legal requirement of the investor. Advisors may not provide an investor in a private fund with any preferential treatment unless they provide certain notices to investors, material economic terms that have been given to other investors in the same fund must be given to all new investors. Existing investors in illiquid funds must be provided disclosure of all preferential treatment at the end of the fundraise, and existing investors in liquid funds must be provided disclosure of preferential treatment following the time of the relevant investment. For both types of funds, on an annual basis, all preferential treatment that's been granted since the last annual notice will need to be disclosed to investors. And just in terms of the timing, the compliance date for these 2 rules is September 14th, 2024 for advisors with $1.5 billion or more in private fund assets, and March 14th, 2025 for advisors with less than $1.5 billion in private fund assets.
That's certainly a lot of reporting to get done. Matt, where do you see your clients feeling the impact of this most?
I think most clients are going to feel it, especially the new managers or first-time managers really lose a lot of their creativity in attracting new investors or seed investors, really because the preferential treatment rules really reduce the ability to beneficial terms to, based on commitment size or other relationships they may have amongst other products and things like that. So it really has the potential to impact new managers.
Kevin, back to the other rule you mentioned. Can you give us an overview of the restricted activities rules?
Sure. All private fund advisors will be required to provide disclosure and, in some cases, receive consent for certain activities under this rule. For example, charging a fund for expenses associated with an investigation of the advisor by any governmental or regulatory authority will require a consent from a majority of investors. However, if the investigation ends up resulting in a sanction for violating the Advisors Act or its rules, the fund can't be charged, notwithstanding the consent. Consent is also required from a majority of investors to borrow money, securities, or other assets from a private fund.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how these things evolve over time with implementation. Thank you both for joining us today and walking through these important new rules. And stay tuned for our next episode of The Alternative Route. Thanks, everyone.